AITA for canceling Thanksgiving after my in-laws replaced the entire menu to prove my wife's cooking isn't that special. I was standing in my kitchen at 6:15 a.m. on Thanksgiving morning, watching my wife Natalie cry over a completely empty refrigerator, when I realized her parents had actually done it. Every single ingredient she'd spent 3 days preparing, the brined turkey, the herb-crusted prime rib, the homemade cranberry orange relish, the truffle mashed potatoes, everything was gone. In their place sat grocery store containers of pre-made deli sides, a frozen butterball turkey still in its plastic wrap, and a handwritten note in my mother-in-law's precise cursive. "Don't worry, sweetheart. We brought real food for everyone. No need to stress yourself trying to impress people. Love, Mom." My wife's hands were shaking so badly she couldn't even hold the note. I took it from her, read it twice to make sure I wasn't hallucinating, and felt something cold and sharp settle into my chest. This wasn't about food. This had never been about food. Let me back up. I'd been married to Natalie for 5 years when this happened, and I'd spent every single one of those years watching her parents systematically dismantle her confidence. Natalie was a professional chef, not just someone who liked to cook, but a graduate of the Culinary Institute with 8 years of experience in Michelin-starred restaurants. She'd worked under Chef Thomas Keller. She'd staged in Paris. She'd been featured in Food and Wine magazine for her innovative approach to classical French technique. But to her parents, Richard and Diane Blackwood, she was still just their perpetually disappointing daughter who'd wasted her expensive education on playing restaurant instead of becoming a lawyer or doctor like they'd planned. Every family dinner at their house was an exercise in passive-aggressive criticism. "Oh, this is interesting. Very adventurous. I'm sure some people enjoy this kind of thing. You know, Natalie, not everyone has sophisticated tastes. Sometimes simple is better." It drove me insane, but Natalie would just smile tightly and change the subject. The problem started escalating about 6 months before that Thanksgiving. Natalie had finally opened her own restaurant, a small, intimate place called Coriander that focused on seasonal tasting menus. It was her dream. She'd poured her savings, her time, her heart into it. The restaurant got incredible reviews almost immediately. The local food critic called her a revelation. Reservations were booked solid for months. She'd finally proven that her career choice wasn't just valid, but exceptional. I was so proud of her I could barely stand it. I'd go to the restaurant during service just to watch her work, seeing the pure joy on her face when she plated a dish perfectly or when customers sent compliments to the kitchen. This was what she was meant to do. But her parents came to the restaurant exactly once, picked at their food, left a mediocre tip, and never mentioned it again. When Natalie tried to talk about the restaurant at family gatherings, her mother would change the subject or suddenly remember an important phone call she needed to make. Things came to a head in early November when Natalie suggested hosting Thanksgiving at our house. We had a beautiful home with a huge kitchen. Natalie had insisted on it when we were house hunting, and she wanted to create something special for the family. Her parents had always hosted before, and their Thanksgivings were exactly what you'd expect. Dry turkey, instant mashed potatoes from a box, canned cranberry sauce still shaped like the can, store-bought pumpkin pie. Traditional, they called it. Natalie wanted to show them what she could do in a comfortable environment, away from the judgment of their formal dining room. She planned a menu that was both approachable and elevated. Dry brined heritage turkey with pan gravy, roasted root vegetables with brown butter and sage, wild mushroom stuffing with house-made brioche, fresh cranberry sauce with port and orange zest, her grandmother's recipe for sweet potato casserole with a maple pecan streusel, and a pear tart with vanilla bean ice cream for dessert. Nothing too weird, nothing too fancy, just really good food made with love and skill. Her mother's response should have been my first warning. "Oh, honey, that sounds like a lot of work. Are you sure you want to stress yourself out like that? Why don't you let me handle the food, and you can just enjoy the day?" Natalie insisted she wanted to do it, that cooking was literally her job, and she loved it. Her mother pursed her lips in that way she had, the expression that said, "I'm disappointed, but I'll pretend to support you," and said fine. Her father didn't even look up from his newspaper. Her younger brother, Kevin, gave her an encouraging smile. He was the only one in her family who actually supported her career, and said he couldn't wait. I thought that was the end of it. I should have known better. The Blackwoods never let things go that easily. Natalie spent the entire week before Thanksgiving preparing. She ordered a specific heritage breed turkey from a farm upstate, made her own stock from chicken bones and aromatics, baked 10 loaves of brioche for the stuffing, tested her pear tart recipe 3 times to get the custard exactly right. She was in her element, humming while she worked, tasting and adjusting and perfecting. I helped where I could, chopping vegetables, washing dishes, being her sous chef and taste tester. Wednesday night, she stayed up until midnight doing her final prep, brining the turkey, roasting vegetables for the stock, making the cranberry sauce. Everything was labeled and organized in our refrigerator like a professional kitchen. When we finally went to bed around 1:30 a.m., she was exhausted, but happy. "Tomorrow's going to be perfect," she whispered as she fell asleep. I believed her. Thursday morning, I woke up at 5:45 a.m. to find Natalie already in the kitchen, standing completely still in front of the open refrigerator. At first, I thought she was just checking on things, making sure everything was still fresh. Then I saw her face. She was white, actually white, like all the blood had drained from her body. I walked over, put my hand on her shoulder, and looked inside. Empty. Not completely empty. Our regular groceries were still there, the milk and eggs and lunch meat. But every single thing she'd prepared for Thanksgiving was gone. The turkey that had cost $85, the homemade stock she'd spent 6 hours making, the brioche, the vegetables, the cranberry sauce in its glass container, the pear tart that had taken 3 tries to perfect. All of it. Vanished. Replaced with the saddest collection of grocery store items I'd ever seen. I found the note stuck to a Tupperware container of what appeared to be mayonnaise-based potato salad. Reading it made my blood pressure spike so fast I could feel my pulse in my temples. Don't worry, sweetheart. We brought real food for everyone. No need to stress yourself trying to impress people. Love, Mom. Real food. As if everything Natalie had made wasn't real. As if her professional training and years of experience meant nothing. As if her passion and skill and artistry were just her trying to impress people, rather than sharing something beautiful she'd created. I looked at Natalie, who was now crying silently, tears just streaming down her face without any sound, and I made a decision. I pulled out my phone and called her mother. It rang 4 times before she picked up, sounding annoyingly cheerful. "Good morning, Adam. Happy Thanksgiving." "What did you do?" I asked, my voice flat. There was a pause. "I'm sorry," she said, with that fake confused tone that made my skin crawl. "What did you do with all of Natalie's food?" I asked again, slower. "Oh, that." Well, I realized that Natalie was putting so much pressure on herself, and you know how she can be, always trying to prove something. I thought it would be better for everyone if we just kept things simple and traditional. I didn't want her to embarrass herself if something didn't turn out right. Embarrass herself. Natalie, the professional chef, who had cooked for presidents and celebrities and food critics. Embarrass herself. I laughed, this sharp, bitter sound that surprised even me. "So you broke into our house and threw away several $100s worth of food she'd spent a week preparing?" Another pause. "We didn't break in. We have a key, remember? You gave us one for emergencies, and I didn't throw anything away. I donated it to that homeless shelter downtown. Very wasteful to let all that food go bad, especially with Natalie's experimental style." That was when I hung up on her. I didn't trust myself to keep talking. Natalie was looking at me with these huge, devastated eyes. "What did she say?" she asked quietly. I told her, word for word. When I got to the part about the homeless shelter, Natalie actually laughed, this awful, broken sound. "She donated my food, my $85 heritage turkey, my homemade stock. She gave it away." She sat down on the kitchen floor, right there on the tile, and put her head in her hands. I sat down next to her, and we just stayed there for a minute, both of us trying to process what had happened. Then Natalie looked up at me and said, "I can't do this anymore. I can't pretend this is normal. I can't keep letting them treat me like I'm stupid or delusional or like my career is just some silly hobby." That was when I made the call. I texted everyone who was supposed to come to Thanksgiving, her parents, her brother Kevin, her aunt and uncle, my parents, my sister, and told them it was canceled. Just a simple message. "Thanksgiving at our house is canceled. We'll explain later." Then I turned off my phone. Natalie looked at me in shock. "Adam, you can't just cancel Thanksgiving." "I just did," I said. "We are not hosting people who think it's acceptable to break into our home and sabotage a week of your work. We are not smiling and pretending this is fine. We're done." My phone started buzzing immediately. Texts, calls, voicemails. I ignored all of it. Natalie's phone started too. She looked at it, then looked at me, and slowly, a smile spread across her face. Not a happy smile, exactly, but something relieved and fierce. "Okay," she said. "Okay, yeah, let's be done." We spent Thanksgiving Day at her restaurant. Natalie had given her staff the day off, but she had her keys and her kitchen and her ingredients. We cooked together, just the 2 of us, making exactly what we wanted to eat. No fancy-tasting menu, no pressure to impress anyone. We made bacon and eggs for breakfast, then spent the afternoon cooking a simple roast chicken with lemon and herbs, roasted potatoes with garlic and rosemary, a green salad with homemade vinaigrette, and an apple crisp with vanilla ice cream. We ate at the chef's table in the kitchen, drinking good wine and talking about everything except her family. It was one of the best Thanksgivings I'd ever had. Natalie seemed lighter than I'd seen her in months, maybe years. "I should have done this a long time ago," she said. "Just stopped caring what they think." "You still care," I said gently. "I know you do. But that doesn't mean you have to keep subjecting yourself to their cruelty." She nodded, quiet for a moment. "Do you think I'm being dramatic? Canceling Thanksgiving over food?" "No," I said firmly. "This wasn't about food. This was about respect. This was about them deciding that their comfort and their need to diminish you was more important than your boundaries, your work, your feelings. They broke into our house, Natalie. They stole your property. That's not normal parent behavior." The fallout started the next day. We turned our phones back on to find dozens of messages. My parents were confused but supportive. They knew the Blackwoods were difficult. My sister was on our side immediately. Kevin had texted Natalie privately. "I don't know what Mom and Dad did, but I'm sorry. You didn't deserve whatever happened." But the messages from Richard and Diane were something else entirely. From Diane: I cannot believe you would be so ungrateful and disrespectful. I spent money on food for your Thanksgiving, and you couldn't even be bothered to host. Your father and I are incredibly hurt. From Richard: Your mother is devastated. She was only trying to help. You've always been overdramatic, but this is a new low. And then, the kicker: a group text to the entire family from Diane. I want everyone to know that Adam and Natalie canceled Thanksgiving yesterday with no explanation after I generously offered to help with the meal preparation. I'm heartbroken that my own daughter would treat family this way, especially after all we've done for her over the years. I hope you all had a lovely holiday despite their selfishness. I watched Natalie read that message, saw her face flush with anger and humiliation. Before I could stop her, she typed out a response and hit send. Here's the explanation, since you want to make this public. You broke into my home using the emergency key. You threw away a week's worth of work and several $100s of ingredients that I, a professional chef, had prepared. You replaced it with grocery store food and left a condescending note implying that my cooking would embarrass me. You didn't generously offer to help. You sabotaged my Thanksgiving because you can't stand that I'm successful at something you don't respect. You've never supported my career, you've never been proud of me, and I'm done pretending that's okay. The key is in the mail. Don't come to my house again. The response was immediate and nuclear. Diane called Natalie crying, saying she was lying, that it had been a misunderstanding, that she was turning the whole family against them. Richard called me, his voice cold and furious, demanding I control my wife and make her apologize. I hung up on him. Kevin called to say he believed Natalie and had suspected something like this for years. My parents called to offer support and ask if we needed anything. Natalie's aunt and uncle were silent, presumably waiting to see which side to take. But here's what I hadn't expected. Natalie's younger cousin, Olivia, reached out. Olivia was 19, studying hospitality management, and she'd always looked up to Natalie. She sent a long message saying that she'd had Thanksgiving at the Blackwood house, that Diane had been bragging about how she'd saved the day by providing real food instead of Natalie's pretentious restaurant nonsense, and that Olivia had been horrified. She'd confronted Diane, asking if it was true that she'd taken Natalie's prepared food without permission. Diane had laughed it off, saying she had every right to make decisions about food being served in her daughter's house, that she'd used the emergency key because Natalie would have been too stubborn to accept help otherwise, and that the whole thing was being blown out of proportion. Olivia had left immediately and wanted Natalie to know that not everyone in the family was okay with what had happened. That message made Natalie cry again, but this time from relief. Over the next week, the family drama reached epic proportions. Diane tried to recruit relatives to her side, spinning increasingly elaborate stories about how she'd been concerned for Natalie's mental health and had only been trying to prevent a meltdown. Richard sent me several emails with legal threats, claiming we'd defamed Diane and demanding a public apology. I forwarded them to my lawyer friend, Daniel Wu, who laughed and said they had no case. Kevin told us privately that their parents were furious about being embarrassed in front of the family and were considering cutting Natalie out of their will. Natalie's response was to laugh and say, "Good, I don't want their money if it comes with their conditions." I'd never loved her more. But the harassment was getting to both of us. Constant calls, texts, emails from various family members wanting us to work it out, or be the bigger person, or remember that family is forever. It was exhausting. If you are enjoying this story already, please subscribe to see more stories like this. Then Natalie got a call from a food blogger named Rachel Kim. Rachel had heard about the drama through the family grapevine. Her mother was friends with Diane and wanted Natalie's side of the story. Initially, Natalie refused. "I'm not turning this into a publicity thing," she said. But Rachel was persistent. She explained that she'd started her blog specifically to talk about how women in the food industry are undermined and dismissed, especially by their own families. She thought Natalie's story was important, that it represented something larger about how female chefs are treated. Eventually, Natalie agreed to meet with her for coffee, off the record, just to talk. I went with her. Rachel was sharp and empathetic, asking good questions and listening carefully to Natalie's answers. At the end of the conversation, she asked permission to write about it, promising to protect our privacy and focus on the broader issues of family dynamics and professional respect. Natalie said yes. The blog post went up 3 days later. Rachel was a good writer, and she framed Natalie's story in the context of larger patterns: mothers who feel threatened by their daughter's success, families who dismiss women's careers as hobbies, the specific way female chefs face scrutiny that male chefs don't. She included quotes from Natalie about what it felt like to have her work literally thrown away by someone who was supposed to support her. The post went viral. Not internet-famous viral, but viral within the food community. Other chefs started sharing their own stories of family members dismissing their work. Food writers weighed in. Someone started a hashtag. Within a week, Natalie's story had been picked up by a few national publications. A writer from Bon Appetit Tit reached out for an interview. Suddenly, this private family drama was very, very public. Diane was mortified. According to Kevin, she was receiving calls and messages from her social circle, all of whom had seen the articles. Her book club had confronted her. Her tennis partners were asking questions. The The carefully curated image she'd maintained, the supportive mother, the gracious hostess, the pillar of the community, was crumbling. She tried to do damage control, posting on social media about how much she loved and supported Natalie, how proud she was of the restaurant, how the whole situation had been a misunderstanding blown out of proportion by the internet. But the comments on her posts were brutal. People calling her out, asking why she'd sabotaged her daughter's Thanksgiving, pointing out that breaking into someone's house to throw away their property wasn't a misunderstanding. Richard tried a different approach, sending Natalie a formal letter through his attorney, demanding she issue a public retraction and apology for false and defamatory statements. My lawyer friend Daniel read the letter and laughed so hard he cried. Natalie was handling it all remarkably well, considering. The restaurant was busier than ever. The publicity had actually helped business. She'd gained thousands of social media followers who wanted to support her. She was getting interview requests and opportunities she'd never had before. But I could see the toll it was taking on her emotionally. She'd lost her parents, at least for now. She was grieving the family she'd wanted to have, even while accepting the family she actually had. One night, about 3 weeks after Thanksgiving, she said to me, "I keep thinking about all the times they did things like this, smaller things, and I just let it go because I wanted to believe they loved me more than they needed to control me." "They do love you," I said, "but they love their vision of who you should be more than they love who you actually are, and that's not your fault. That's their failure, not yours." She cried then, really cried, and I held her while she mourned the relationship she'd never have with her parents. Christmas approached, and with it came the inevitable question: what were we doing for the holidays? Diane sent a formal email inviting us to their annual Christmas Eve party, as if nothing had happened. The email was CC'd to the entire family, clearly designed to make us look bad if we declined. Natalie stared at it for a long time before deleting it without responding. We spent Christmas with my family instead. Low-key, loving, drama-free. My mother went out of her way to compliment Natalie's cooking, to ask about the restaurant, to treat her professional accomplishments as worthy of respect. It was such a stark contrast to the Blackwood family dynamics that Natalie actually got emotional. "Is this what normal families are like?" she asked my mother. My mom hugged her and said, "Families that love each other don't keep score. They don't need you to fail to feel successful themselves. You deserve that kind of love, sweetheart." I saw Natalie's face, saw her absorbing that validation, and I felt grateful for my family in a way I never had before. New Year's brought an unexpected development. Kevin called Natalie to tell her that their parents had announced they were going to therapy. Diane had apparently had some kind of breakdown after a particularly brutal confrontation with her sister, Natalie's aunt, who had finally told Diane exactly what she thought of her parenting. The therapist they were seeing, Dr. Elizabeth Hartley, had apparently specialized in family dynamics and narcissistic behavior patterns. Kevin was skeptical about whether they'd actually change, but he thought Natalie should know. "I don't think they're doing it to become better people," he said honestly. "I think they're doing it because they're embarrassed and they want people to stop talking about them. But maybe, I don't know. Maybe it'll help anyway." Natalie thanked him for the information, but told him she wasn't ready to engage with their parents yet, therapy or not. She needed space and time to heal from years of accumulated damage. Meanwhile, the restaurant continued to thrive. Natalie hired 2 new line cooks and a pastry chef. She expanded the menu slightly, adding a few more tables. Food critics from New York and Chicago came to review Coriander and gave it glowing write-ups. There was talk of a James Beard Award nomination. Natalie was happy, genuinely happy, in a way I'd never quite seen before. She wasn't cooking to prove anything anymore. She wasn't performing for anyone's approval. She was just doing what she loved, what she was extraordinary at, for people who appreciated it. The contrast between the chef she'd become and the anxious, approval-seeking daughter she'd been around her parents was striking. I mentioned this to her one evening after service, and she thought about it for a while. "I think I spent so much energy trying to get them to see me," she said finally. "And all that energy was just wasted. They were never going to see me the way I needed them to. So now I'm spending that energy on things that matter, on my work, on people who actually care, on us." She smiled at me. "On building a life I'm proud of." February brought another surprise. Diane reached out through Kevin, asking if she could meet with Natalie in a neutral location with her therapist present. Dr. Hartley apparently thought it would be beneficial for Diane to apologize and take accountability in a structured setting. Natalie was torn. Part of her wanted nothing to do with it. Part of her was curious whether her mother was capable of real change. After talking it through with me and with her own therapist, Dr. Angela Monroe, who she'd started seeing in December, she agreed to one session, with conditions. I would be there. Dr. Monroe would be there. And if at any point Natalie felt uncomfortable or disrespected, she was leaving. Diane agreed to everything. The meeting was scheduled for a Thursday afternoon at Dr. Hartley's office, a quiet space with comfortable chairs and soft lighting that felt designed to prevent anyone from getting too angry. I'd never seen Diane look so diminished. She'd always been this force of nature, perfectly dressed, perfectly composed, always in control. But that day, she looked older and uncertain. Richard wasn't there. Apparently, Dr. Hartley had advised that the first conversation should be just between Diane and Natalie. Kevin was in the waiting room for moral support. Dr. Hartley opened the session by establishing ground rules. Diane would speak first without interruption, then Natalie could respond, and then they'd have a facilitated discussion. Everyone agreed. Diane took a breath and started talking. She apologized for Thanksgiving, said she understood now that what she'd done was a violation of boundaries and trust. She said she'd spent weeks in therapy examining why she'd done it, and she'd realized it came from a place of feeling inadequate as a mother, of feeling like Natalie's success somehow highlighted her own failures. She said she was proud of Natalie, but didn't know how to express it, because she'd been raised to believe that pride made people complacent. She said she was sorry for years of criticism and dismissal, and she wanted to rebuild their relationship if Natalie was willing. It was a good apology. I could see Dr. Hartley had coached Diane well. It acknowledged harm, took responsibility, offered no excuses. But I could also see Natalie's face, and I could tell she was waiting for the other shoe to drop. When it was her turn to speak, Natalie was quiet for a moment, gathering her thoughts. Then she said, "I appreciate you acknowledging what happened. I do. But I need you to understand that Thanksgiving wasn't the problem. Thanksgiving was just the moment where I finally couldn't ignore the problem anymore. The problem is that you've spent my entire adult life treating my career like it's a phase I'll grow out of, or a rebellion against you. You've never come to the restaurant except that one time when you picked at your food and left. You've never asked me about my work except to imply that I'm wasting my education. You donated my food to a homeless shelter like it was garbage, and then you told everyone that you were helping me. That's not a one-time mistake. That's a pattern." Diane started to protest, but Dr. Hartley gently redirected her. "Let Natalie finish." Natalie continued, her voice steady but strained. "I've wanted your approval my whole life. I chose culinary school partly because I loved cooking, but also because I thought if I could be the best at something, you'd finally see me as successful. And when that didn't work, I thought maybe opening my own restaurant would do it. Maybe good reviews would do it. Maybe a James Beard nomination would do it. But I realize now that nothing I do will ever be good enough, because the problem isn't my accomplishments. The problem is that you decided a long time ago what kind of daughter I should be, and I'm not that person. And I'm tired of apologizing for being myself." She paused, and I saw tears in her eyes. "So yes, I accept your apology for Thanksgiving. But I need to see real change over time before I can trust you again. I need you to respect my boundaries. I need you to actually engage with my career instead of dismissing it. I need you to see me as an adult who gets to make her own choices about her life. Can you do that?" There was a long silence. Diane was crying now, which I'd never seen before. She nodded, then said, "I'll try. I know that's not enough, but I'll try. I don't know if I can change everything overnight, but I want to. I don't want to lose you." It wasn't a perfect moment. It wasn't a TV reconciliation where everyone hugs and everything's fine. But it was honest, and it was a beginning. The session ended shortly after, with Dr. Hartley suggesting monthly check-ins and clear boundaries around communication. Natalie agreed to limited contact, a phone call once a week, maybe dinner once a month in a public place. No emergency keys, no unannounced visits. No commentary on her career unless it was genuinely supportive. Richard would need to have his own conversation with Natalie when he was ready. Baby steps. As we left the therapist's office, Natalie leaned against me in the parking lot and said, "I don't know if she can actually change." "Maybe not," I said. "But at least now you know it's not your job to make her. You showed up. You told the truth. What she does with that is on her." Natalie kissed me. "Thank you for having my back through all of this. I couldn't have done it without you." "Always," I said. "That's what being married means. I'm on your team, no matter what." Spring came, and with it, a shift in the family dynamics. Diane actually followed through on her commitments. She called once a week, asking about the restaurant without any judgment or criticism. She attended a local food festival where Natalie was doing a cooking demonstration and actually seemed engaged and interested. She posted supportive things on social media about coriander. It was strange and tentative, but it was real effort. Richard took longer. He eventually sent Natalie a stiff, formal email apologizing for his role in the Thanksgiving incident and for not supporting her career. It wasn't warm, but it was acknowledgement. Kevin reported that their father was attending therapy sessions with Diane and was slowly beginning to understand how his dismissiveness had affected Natalie. Progress was slow and imperfect, but it was progress. Natalie remained cautiously optimistic. "I'm not holding my breath," she told me, "but I'm also not slamming the door completely. If they can actually change, maybe we can have some kind of relationship. If they can't, at least I know I gave them a chance." The James Beard nomination came through in May. Natalie was nominated for Best Chef in the Northeast region. When she called her mother to tell her, Diane cried and said she was proud. When she called her father, he said, "That's wonderful, sweetheart. You deserve it." It was such a normal parent response, so unremarkable, that it made Natalie emotional. These were the reactions she'd wanted her whole life. Better late than never, I supposed. The awards ceremony was in June in Chicago. Natalie didn't win. The award went to a chef from Boston who'd been in the industry for 30 years, but she didn't seem disappointed. Just being nominated is incredible, she said. 5 years ago, I was working the line in someone else's kitchen. Now I have my own restaurant and a James Beard nomination. That's success no matter what anyone else thinks. I couldn't have been prouder of her. And when we got home, there was a bouquet of flowers on our doorstep with a card from Diane and Richard. Congratulations on your nomination. We're proud of you. Love, Mom and Dad. Looking back now, more than a year later, I can see how that catastrophic Thanksgiving changed everything. It forced Natalie to set boundaries she should have set years earlier. It exposed family dysfunction that had been festering beneath a veneer of politeness. It cost her the uncomplicated relationship with her parents she'd always wanted, but it gave her freedom and self-respect. The Blackwoods still aren't perfect. Diane occasionally slips into old patterns of criticism before catching herself. Richard still struggles to show genuine interest in Natalie's work. But they're trying, and that's more than we had before. Natalie has built a life she's proud of, surrounded by people who respect and support her. The restaurant is thriving. She's working on a cookbook. She's happy. And isn't that what matters? Not whether her parents approve, but whether she's living authentically and building something meaningful. As for me, I learned that sometimes the most loving thing you can do for your spouse is help them walk away from toxicity, even when it's family, even when it's hard, even when everyone else says you should forgive and forget. Some things shouldn't be forgotten. Some things need to be confronted. And sometimes, canceling Thanksgiving is the healthiest choice you can make. If you enjoyed this, you'll definitely want to see the next ones too. So subscribe now and let me know your take in the comments.